Welcome back to Hike Hill Hustle. I'm your host, Randy Black. I know it's been a while. It has been a very emotional, very stressful last few months. I wasn't even sure if I was going to come back, but after today, I was like, you know what? You got to. You got to do this. So, the first thing I want to do is for the next couple videos, I am going to be wrapping up 2025, moving on to 2026 goals, and then get back to just Hike Hill Hustle. So the next couple of episodes, and maybe even after that, the format is definitely going to have to change. So let's just get right into it. This episode is three funerals and no ticket. So last year I did touch a little bit on my aunt passing last year. She passed in last February, 1 year ago, because this is February, and it was a very difficult time for my family, and still is. Her grandchildren that she raised are still struggling with her loss, and that's to be expected. You got to grieve the way you grieve. Um, but I want to talk about three funerals that I went to in 2025. And the reason why I want to talk about these three funerals is because I'm an agnostic atheist. And so, as an agnostic atheist, I have no more connection to a higher being. I'm just not connected like that anymore. So, funerals look differently now than they did back when I was a believer. And going to three funerals in 1 year also was very emotional for me. So I want to compare the three funerals and tell you what those three funerals did for me. So, in the terms of High Heel Hustle, this is more of the heel. So, this whole episode is going to be about that inner me, the heal me. So, let's just get into it. So, I've talked about my great aunt passing before. I'm pretty sure. Yes, I know that I did. And in that episode, in that video, I talked about my mother. This has nothing to do with her. So, but what I didn't really cover is how I felt about the funeral. Now, the funeral was to be expected. I've been to funerals through this organization before, so I didn't expect all of the pomp and circumstance that you might think of when you think of funerals, especially one that is held in the Black church. My third funeral was in a Black church. So this funeral, it told mostly about their God, and my aunt was mentioned here and there, and it was hard to see my family crying, even though I too was crying, because part of what makes me an agnostic atheist is death. Um, because I watched people that I love cry. I watched their world fall apart. I watched them sit there and try to come to terms with the loss of someone who was very special to them and in our family. And so for me, it's hard for me to see how anyone could believe in a God when, if I had the power to stop or prevent what I saw, I would. But that's neither here nor there. So that was part of it for me. It's like, how could any loving being who has the power to not let this happen, why wouldn't you intervene? Okay. Because when that person leaves the family, their friends, those people who are left behind will never be the same. They're going to always want to see that person again. There are going to be times when, like, you're my person, you know? So, but the funeral itself, as far as funerals go, it was very, like I said, I'm used to this, Although there was crying, it was organized crying. People were crying. They were grieving, as they should, me included, because that was my aunt. I've known her my entire life, lived in the same neighborhood with her. So it was hard for me too. And this, I don't know if I mentioned this on my last video about this funeral. I also had some guilt. I know I carry a lot of guilt all the time. I do carry a lot of guilt all the time. And the guilt I carried from my aunt was the last time that I saw her, which was Mother's Day 2024. So I had seen her and I knew she was had been sick after that, but I actually saw her. I went to go see her that day because I was back in South Carolina and I really wanted to see her. She's, like I said, she's my aunt. I wanted to see her. And one of the last things that we talked about was the family tree. Now, I want to tell you guys, if you don't know me in personal life, great. But that family tree, doing that family tree has been incredibly difficult. And I've been working on it for literally years. And I'm still working on it. Now, I think I've gotten as far back as I can. And I have since reached out to professionals for help. Not sure I'm going to get it, but I digress. That will be a different video when I talk about the family tree. But anywho, I was talking to her about the family tree. And like I said, I've been working on this family tree for years. So she was aware that I had been working on the family tree from years ago. Now, she may have not have thought about it when she see me because it's not something I talk about all the time when I see my family. But I just remember one of the times when I was working on the tree, asking her for some information. Now, my grandmother, which was her sister, is the one who told me to contact my aunt. It was like, hey, she knows more than I do. And when I contacted her, and this is years before she passed away, she had no interest in this family tree. She didn't want to talk about it. She was like, oh, I don't really know. You should ask your grandmother. I said, well, she literally sent me to you. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this family tree has been so difficult. I'm getting very little assistance. So fast going back to Mother's Day 2023, and I'm talking to my aunt about a family tree. Um, she hands me a family tree that somebody, a relative, had done. It was not our family tree. I think this relative is probably related to us on one of the branches, but the tree that that relative gave to my aunt was not our family. So I'm looking, I was like, I don't recognize these names. And she was like, neither do I. And she was like, I think that they did their side, which is not the side that we're related to. So we had a good laugh about that. And I told her how far I had gotten with the tree. So we had a good conversation. So you're asking about the guilt. I've circled, now I'm landing. I told her, I said, I'm going to work on putting pictures on there. Now, if you know, like I said, if you know anything about personal and you've seen me on my personal social media, Facebook in particular, that's the only social media that I really talk about doing a family tree because that's a private account and it's only for people who know me personally and my family. So it has been difficult for me to get pictures. But I promised her, I said, you know what, I'm gonna keep trying to get pictures. And she said, well, when you do, I want to see it. And I was like, of course. That never happened. I did reach out to family. They were not forthcoming with pictures. It was very difficult. And then she passed before I could do it. So after she passed away, and there's that guilt. You think you have time. You think you have time to do the thing. And even though I tried and failed, I think I could have tried harder. I do get frustrated with my family when it comes to that family tree. And so I still carry that guilt. And I carried it that day and I carried it at that funeral. And I thought, why didn't I talk to her more? Why didn't I ask her for the pictures? Why didn't I come and do more to get my relatives to send pictures? Even though it's very difficult for me to stay and like keep on these people. So that funeral, it reminds me, or it gets me to where it's like funerals is for the people who this person has left behind. And what those people leave behind are broken people. people who wish they had more time, because I wish I had more time to show her. And I still haven't finished the tree. I've gotten the pictures on there, but I think I've gotten as far as I can, but there's still more pictures I want to put on there. Now, the first December funeral I went to was for a friend's mother. My friend's mother had passed away some time weeks before, but their family couldn't get together because it was during the holidays and they were all busy. So the first Tuesday in December is when everybody was gonna be together. So that's when the funeral. And when I found out, I wanted to go. And I was like, hey, let me go. She was like, it's not a big deal. You don't have to. I was like, I want to be there for you. So she reluctantly gave me the information and I showed up. Now, she did tell me that it was going to be a typical Catholic funeral. Now, I had never been to a Catholic funeral, so I had no idea what that meant. But it made me feel like it was something that I needed to learn. So I went and I did a little very light research online about Catholic funerals. And I went, when I tell you the traditions, the things that they do for a funeral, I was fascinated. They got those kneeling benches, and the priest would say something, and the people attending the funeral would repeat something, or they would say something in response. And I had no idea what they were saying. I had no idea what to say. I'm just following along with them. There was singing and all this ritual. And I didn't, when I say I enjoyed it, I don't mean that somebody passed, but I really respected the way they said goodbye. I respected because I knew from my friend that this is what her mother wanted. So she got exactly what she wanted. But it was how everybody came together for the family who lost someone. I'm assuming these people were friends, people in the church, me, friends of someone who lost their mother, being there for those people who have this great loss. And I was really dialed in to how they were doing it, and I was like, this is very interesting. So it was the songs that they sang, and the prayers, and they're kneeling, and they had some smoke. I actually got sick off that smoke, but I enjoyed the way, I don't want to say enjoy, I respected the way that they were allowed to say goodbye. I really respected that. Not that I didn't respect the first one. I'm just telling you the difference. One was very subdued, very calculated. They all were very calculated. But this one, although it didn't have the pomp and circumstance of my third funeral and wasn't as subdued as my first one, it's just the variation of how people say goodbye. And I appreciated people coming together for this family both times, and me being part of that family the first time. Now to the third funeral. This was another family member. My family had a really rough time in 2025. So this was a cousin. She was only 2 years older than me. She was very sick, has been very sick, and she was on dialysis, and she knew that she was going to pass away. I don't know if she knew that was going to be the day that she did, but anyway, she had been sick for some time. So I had been contacted by the family to say that she was sick, and they did not expect her to make it. Well, her funeral was on a Saturday. It was the Saturday before Christmas. Now, I want you to also know there was a fourth funeral that I didn't go to. Her grandmother also passed away. So the person that passed away is my cousin. Her mother lost her daughter and her mother within days of each other, and days before Christmas 2025. So very sad time for my family. So I went to my cousin's funeral. Like I said, she's 2 years older than me. She left behind her husband, her children, grandchildren, cousins, aunts, nieces, just a whole plethora of people who missed her. Now, I really want to talk about this one because I had not been to a Black church in quite some time. And I certainly have not been to a Black funeral of this caliber in quite some time. Now, I know my family. I knew her religion. I know her mother. Her mother's a minister. So I expected pomp and circumstance. But what I didn't expect is how I was going to feel in that church. And that's really, really what I want to talk about, is how I felt in that church. And my oldest daughter was with me, and I kept looking back at her because unfortunately we couldn't sit on the same road, and that was just because of the progression of how when we as a family got up to see, it ran out with me, and I was able to sit next to my grandmother. My grandmother, of course, is used to this, and so she knew the song, she knew, she was engaged. I didn't know any of the songs, I couldn't get engaged, but I did enjoy the songs. um no longer being a part of an organization, I what it wasn't until very, very recently that I gave myself permission to enjoy religious songs. Now, I don't listen to it. However, this is a huge difference than me turning away from it, because that's what we've always been taught to do. And that's something that I never address. And so I was taught never to listen to gospel. We were not allowed to listen to other faiths' music. And so when I would hear it, I would immediately turn away from it, turn off the music, didn't listen, whatever, depending on how I came across this music. But that day, I had no choice. I was in a church, these people were singing, and it was so heartfelt and it was so emotional. It was hard not to be moved by the music. And I gave myself permission to be moved by the music and to watch my family as they once again grieved and try to get through one of the hardest things that's going to happen, hopefully, in their lives. And I appreciated the way this church allowed my family to grieve the way that my cousin who passed away, wanted, the way her mother needed to grieve. Because then in 2 days, she was going to be burying her mother. So I watched my cousin, and I thought, my gosh, how hard this must be for you. You were burying your daughter. You're not supposed to bury your children. And then you're going to have to, on Monday, because this was on a Saturday, you're going to have to bury your mother. And how difficult that must be for her. But she, and I understand that one of the reasons why people stay gravitated toward and cling to religion is because it gives you a hope that that person will be seen again. And they talked about that. Now, I personally don't believe that. Like I said, I'm not a religious person. So, but I liked, and it gave me a little comfort that she had comfort and that she believes that she will see her daughter again, and her daughter was in heaven, and this was just temporary for them. But it was also the music and watching them grieve and watching other people who were not family but friends and how they remembered her, and they were able to get up and talk about things they remember. And I want to bring up, I do apologize, at the Catholic funeral they did the same thing. There were people who talked about stories about the deceased and the family, and so it's a way for them to say goodbye. And although these were 3 different funerals, 3 different religious organizations, I could appreciate, as a non-believer of any deity, the way that all 3 of those religions were able to come together for the grieving families. Now, see, I bet y'all didn't expect me to say that, but I did. I really appreciate it. I appreciated how each group grieved, how they came together for this family, how they came together for the person that's gone. And the stories at my cousin's funeral, my gosh, even my daughter said it, hearing stories, real life stories about her and how she was going to be so missed and how great she was. Now, this is the second part of this video, of this podcast, 3 funerals and no ticket. So like I said, my cousin was 2 years older than me when she passed away. And in December, one of the things that I do, which is going to be the segue to the next video, is I review the year in preparation for the next year. I am very much so a planner, okay? So on December 1st, I'm sorry, I said my friend's mother's funeral was on the 2nd. It was actually on the 1st. I started my new job on the 2nd. I knew very early on that job was not for me, which is fortunate because today I lost my job. But anyway, do no fault of my own. Once again, you can't control what you can't control. It's fine. I'm okay. But when I went back and was looking and reviewing my year one thing that I noticed or became very apparently clear that I only left the state of Georgia twice in 2025. Both times was for a funeral in my family. And with my cousin being only 2 years older than me, it really put things in perspective for me that even though she had been sick, but when I think about death, I also have to think about life. And am I living my life to the fullest? Am I getting the joy out of my life that I can? And when I look back and I realize there were no tickets for 2025, no airplane tickets, no train tickets, no cruise tickets. I left Georgia twice, both times for a funeral. And I don't ever want that to happen again. I don't ever want to have a year like I had in 2025 where I go to 3 funerals, should have been 4, and no ticket. No ticket out of where I was in 2025 and again in 2026. Financial um, instability. It's like, what am I doing? Why am I not doing what I say that would make me happy, which is more travel? Now that I've lost my job, I'm not really sure how that's going to work, but it will work because I don't ever want to go through that again. I want my life to be happy. I want to be able to travel. I want to experience more things in 2026. That is my goal. But for this particular episode, I want to reflect on how we said goodbye to a lot of people in my families, in my friends' family, and how it set me up for looking and doing things differently for 2026. Well, that is all we have today. I will not be doing an affirmation because I'm doing a catch up. Um, so until next time, keep hiking, stay healed, and keep hustling with intention.